I think there is something wrong with the deer in my area, and I don't think it's just deer anymore. I'm from a small town in a very rural state, which I will not name for privacy purposes. I studied sociology in my state university and graduated with honors. I couldn't afford any further education because I had a family to take care of, so I resorted to other jobs. It wasn't so bad. I worked every day as a handyman in my hometown. It was so small and obscure that we weren't even on the map. Population: 200 people. That said, one thing I did with my brothers was that we went hunting once the season opened up. My brothers and I still lived in town, but we would go up to the mountain and camp with our father before he passed away. We kept that tradition up since then. I was the youngest one. My brother, Jack, was the middle child, and Jason was the oldest one. We would go camping in the woods for a week and just drink beer, shoot around a bit, and relax. My kids would go to my parents, and my wife would take that week to relax away from the stress of kids and me. It was a nice setup that we all looked forward to. Sometimes I would bring back enough deer meat to last my entire family a month. We would also share with our closest friends and neighbors. It was the neighborly thing to do. Besides, there were always more deer in the woods. Things took a turn 2 years ago when I was diagnosed with alpha-gal syndrome, a disease that can be caused by tick bites, which makes you allergic to a sugar molecule found in most mammals. It causes me to break into rashes, hives, itching, vomiting, and everything in between. I felt like it was some sort of cosmic joke, being forced to become a vegetarian by my own body. That said, I still went along with my brothers to join them in the hunting. Although I couldn't eat the meat, I could still drink and lay back. "Hey Jake, why don't you just eat some meat? Stop being a wimp and overcome it." Jason slapped the cap off of my head while walking over to get another beer. "Dumbass, you can't overcome an allergy." "I'll eat some meat the day you learn to eat a salad," I jested back, causing Jack to roar with laughter. The first day went by smoothly. We just sat around drinking and ribbing on each other. By the third day, we began to get a bit more serious with our trekking skills. We noticed several deer tracks a bit away from our camp, and we spent a couple of hours following it until we saw it. A reddish-brown doe stood gracefully at around 3 feet tall. She was feeding on some grass, just munching away, completely unaware of how close to being another poor victim of the cruelty of the life cycle she was. I looked over at Jack, who had his rifle aimed at it, but before he could take a shot, Jason hollered loudly and lightly shoved Jack, causing the gun to go off. The deer snapped its head at us before quickly squirreling away back into the woods. "Jason, the fuck did you do that for?" Jack shoved Jason away from him, who was laughing hysterically. "Yeah man, we spent all day tracking this one down," I said, pretty irritated. "Oh, relax you guys. There was barely any meat in that doe anyways. You guys are so serious. Lighten up." "Everything is a joke with you," Jack muttered while adjusting his rifle. "What's that supposed to mean?" Jason asked, feigning curiosity. "Alright, enough you two. We spent all day at this. Why don't we go back to the camp and settle in for the day? I'm pretty hungry and it's getting pretty cold," I intercepted, not wanting to cause yet another needless argument. "Fine, let's go." Jack agreed, and we began to walk back to our camp. I awoke the next morning to a pretty loud commotion. Jack was yelling at Jason, I rolled my eyes and opened my tent to see Jack's face was covered in slight blood, while Jason was laughing hysterically. "What the fuck happened to your face?" I asked, pretty concerned. "This fucking asshole!" Jason cut Jack off by opening his tent wide open, revealing the body of a doe right next to Jack's sleeping bag. As I looked closer, I thought I could see it still twitch. I put the doe right next to Jack when he was sleeping. Oh, you should have looked at his face. The way he started screaming, Jason said in between fits of laughter. "This is the last time I go camping with you," Jack angrily yelled while he stormed off with a water bottle to clean his face. I looked over at Jason and nodded my head in disappointment. "Not cool, dude." "What? It was just a joke." "Whatever. We should probably go and start the field dressing of the doe." "Already done that," he boasted while taking a sip of another canned beer. "Really? I guess we should load it up in the truck and take it back to Ma's house then," I said, trying to hold in a yawn. Jack became looking cleaner than before, and they began to haul off the deer into the direction of the truck. I stayed behind to start taking down the tent and gathering our supplies. I trailed behind my brothers, and as they loaded the body into the back of the truck, I put our supplies into my car. We began to drive back to our mother's house. Eventually, we reached our destination, and right as we pulled up, my kids came running out of the house. Tyler was the first one to reach me, his little arms reaching up for me to hold him. "Hey buddy, how's it going? Where's Grandma?" I asked while Tina jogged after him. "Dad, Mom said I could go sign up for drama camp at the end of this month," she stated firmly. "Alright, we'll look at it over together later. Where's Grandma?" I asked. "I'm right here." My mother came out, standing right next to my wife as they all turned over. "Oh dear, you guys look grimy. Bring the deer to the barn and you boys can start skinning and butchering after you shower," she stated firmly, while motioning us to go into the house. I quickly kissed my wife before running into the house and quickly jumping into the shower. By the time I finished, I saw that my family was sitting around the kitchen with my brothers nowhere to be seen. "Where's Jack and Jason?" I asked while grabbing a cup of coffee. "Your brothers went to the barn to start processing the deer. They said hopefully they can finish by tonight. We can start slow cooking some venison barbecue and have it ready by morning," my wife said while taking a bite of some crackers. I leaned forward and gave her a hug, leaning my chin over her head. Tina just giggled as she continued to eat her breakfast. "How was camping?" Mom asked while taking a bite out of some bacon. "It was okay. Same old stuff," I lied with a smile, hoping to avoid any arousal. She always hated conflicts. She raised her eyebrow but continued to eat while looking down at her phone. The rest of the day went by smoothly, and my brothers worked hard to prep the deer meat, while the rest of us made random dishes here and there for tomorrow. By the time we finished cleaning and cooking, it was time to go to bed. I put my kids to bed and helped my mother clean up before going to bed with my wife. The next day, I woke up to the smell of various sizzling meats and spices wafting through the bedroom door. I got up quickly and got ready to start my day and headed downstairs. "Morning, sweetie," my wife said all cheery as she poured a cup of coffee for me. "Your entire family went over to see some neighbors that needed help or something. They said they'll be back soon." "Is that so?" I raised my eyebrow while giving her a peck on the lips. "Sadly, we have to set up the entire table because a ton of people are coming over for dinner," she sighed while leaning her head onto my shoulder. I laughed it off and started helping her load all the chairs and plates for our guests. Eventually, Hours went by and my family started arriving, along with several people. I looked over at Jack and saw that he was rubbing his right eye before walking over to me. "Hey, you got some eye drops?" "I think I got pink eye," he said before being interrupted by an aunt who motioned me to go with her. "Yeah, I think there's some in my bathroom. Go ahead and check." I dismissed him as I went off to make small talk to random people. Eventually, it was time for dinner, and we all sat around as Jason started bragging about how he single-handedly caught the deer and hustled it to the truck as me and Jack slept through it all. I couldn't eye roll anymore at his dumb story because I could feel a migraine start to form. He didn't even touch his plate, spending all of his time talking. Soon they started to dig into the venison barbecue, which looked delicious, dripping in various juices and slathered in barbecue sauce. I begrudgingly ate my potato salad and rice, as everyone around me marveled about the taste of venison. The rest of the night went by smoothly, and we continued to talk and drink until it was time for my kids to go to bed. The last of the guests went home and we cleaned up and called it a day. It was about 3 in the morning when I felt some hands on my shoulder shake me awake. "Daddy, I don't feel good," I heard the quiet whisper of Tina as she moaned in slight pain. "What's wrong, sweetie?" I said, my eyes adjusting to the dark. "It hurts," she moaned even more as she leaned her head on my chest. I reached over and turned on the light before looking down at her. Her once beautiful blue eyes were now completely bloodshot, and she had a rash all over her neck. It looked like trickles of blood were pouring slightly out of her eyes. Jesus Christ! I pushed my hands on her little forehead, and her head wasn't just slightly warm. It felt like she was on fire. She suddenly collapsed and went limp on my arms, but I could still feel her breathing. I leaned my arm onto my wife's shoulder and shook her. "Kristen, wake up! Kristen!" She groggily awoke and looked over at us. "What's wrong?" she asked, before snapping wide awake. "Oh my God, Tina! What happened to you? Baby, are you okay?" "Kristen, I gotta take her to the hospital. We gotta go now," I said rapidly while scooping up my daughter as we rushed out of the bedroom. We hurried down the stairs and into the car before driving straight onto the road. My wife pulled out her phone and pressed it against her ear. "Linda, Jack and I are on our way to the hospital right now. There's something wrong with Tina, but Tyler is in his bed. I'll let you know when we get there." I floored the gas and drove straight through the darkness of the night, counting down the minutes until we reached the hospital. We eventually spotted the lights of the town and kept driving through until we saw the hospital building up ahead. I looked over my shoulder to see my daughter holding my wife tightly. Although the engine of the car was pretty loud, I could hear the muffled giggles of Tina. I looked over at my wife, who was equally as confused as I was, but before we could even say anything, I quickly slammed on the brake before I could hit the parked ambulance in front of us. I quickly got out of my car and opened the door to my wife's side and grabbed my daughter from my wife's hands. We ran into the entrance of the hospital, running up to the only receptionist that was standing, looking tired. "Please help my daughter. She passed out earlier and she has these weird rashes on her face," my wife cried out. The receptionist perked up and looked at us both before grabbing a phone and dialing it. "We have an OB code." A nurse came out of nowhere with a gurney and laid my daughter on it. Tina's entire skin was all red, and the outline of her veins were turning all black. She looked even worse than before. My beautiful little girl looked so sick that my heart was breaking. They only let my wife through the doors with Tina. The receptionist started asking me all these questions to which I had no answer for. "Sir, what happened to your daughter? What was she doing when she passed out?" "I don't know. All I know was that she woke us up and passed out, and when I turned on the light, her skin looked like hell. The black veins is something new, I answered honestly. Alright, the staff is doing everything they can to assess the situation. For now, please take a seat and we'll notify you in a couple minutes. Before I could argue back, my phone went off. I looked down to see that it was my son, Tyler, who was FaceTiming me. He must have noticed that we were gone. I accepted it, but the screen was all black. I could barely see the faint outline of his face. Hey buddy, Mom and I were… Shh. Something's wrong with Grandma. I'm scared, he whispered quietly. My heart quickly dropped to my stomach. Is she sick? I asked. Listen. He got quiet and must have held out his phone, but I couldn't see anything. It looked like he was in the kitchen bathroom downstairs. I was about to say something, but the camera focused and I could see the back of my mother's head as she sat facing away from her line of vision. She was just laughing hysterically as she cut away at something. Tyler moved the camera downward at a better angle to see what she was cutting. I took a closer look to see that she was slicing away at one of the dogs on the table. I felt the contents of my stomach jump at my throat. Okay buddy, close the door and I'll be right there. Lock it, I whispered. I ran out back into my car and quickly called Holden, the town sheriff and a close friend. He answered pretty quickly, his voice sounding all tired and annoyed. Jake, listen, I cut him before he could say anything else. Something's wrong with my mom, Holden. Something ain't right at my house. I went to the hospital with Tina and Kristen, and I need to send some cops over at my house. I'm real scared, man, I blurted out. Jake, all my guys have already been sent out. It's like the town's gone crazy tonight. I'm at the station right now, but I'll be there as soon as I can. I'll meet you there. His voice was equally as shakily as mine was as he hung up. I must have drove 100 miles per hour because it was mere minutes before I arrived at my house. I slammed the car door and ran to the direction of my house. I wanted to go in, but I saw Jason sitting out in the front porch. Jason? What the fuck's going on? I yelled angrily that he wasn't inside looking after Tyler or my mother. He looked up at me and started laughing hysterically before crying hysterically. I've never seen Jason cry before. I think I caused this. What do you mean? I asked, now feeling curious. The morning I got that deer, I went for a walk in the morning and I saw that doe acting weird. She was making this odd noise and slamming her head into a tree. At first, I thought it was the funniest thing I've ever seen. It was like the doe was laughing as she hit her head with a tree. I know they say to avoid a deer that act weird, but y'all were already mad at me for ruining that shot the day before. Y'all were always mad at me. So I aimed my rifle and I put her down. I thought the meat would have been cleaned out by the meat when we cooked it. When's the last time we ever got sick? I just wanted y'all to be happy with me. He cried out before shaking uncontrollably as he put his hands up to his face. I felt an anger in me like never before. That bastard put his ego before our health, and now Tina was in the hospital, and God knows what was going on with my mother. I walked up to him ready to pound at his face, but stopped the closer I got to him. He was all covered in blood. Jason? Is that your blood? I asked quietly. No. He shook his head before continuing. Jack was acting all weird. I found him beheading Mama, and he started coming at me with a butcher knife. I had to stop him. I looked at him, horrified, before looking back at the front door. I took a few steps before walking into the house. The entire living room looked like a tornado went through it. There was Jack's body laying through what was once a glass coffee table. The entire right side of his face was covered in boils, and that same rash Tina had. I looked away before running to the kitchen bathroom. "Buddy?" I said softly, trying not to scare him as I gently knocked on the door. The door opened with a slight squeak and I felt Tyler's body wrap around me. "Daddy, I was so scared. I had a bunch of yelling coming from everyone," he cried out, his body shaking my arms as he talked. "I know, bud. Just close your eyes and I'll carry you out. We're going back to the hospital to get Mommy and Tina." He merely nodded before I scooped him up. We walked over to the front of the house and started walking in the direction of the car, when I started seeing the police lights of Holden's car. He pulled up near me and motioned me to enter the car. "You guys okay?" he quickly asked. "Yeah man, we're fine, but..." I wanted to explain, but he cut me off before I could say anything else. "Listen, something's wrong. The military is pulling up and setting blockades around town. I had to call the CDC earlier. Some weird outbreak about some prion disease among the local deer. It drove some people mad and made them do some scary things. I'll take you guys up to my cabin, but I gotta go see what they're doing in the hospital." He spoke as fast as he could. "Kristen and Tina are there. Are they okay? Do you know anything?" I quietly asked, trying not to scare Tyler. I called up Dr. Reynolds and he said Tina showed the symptoms, but it's too early to tell with Kristen. She chose to stay with Tina while I took you two to the cabin. As soon as they're cleared, I can drive them back. The phones aren't working right because there was an accident at our only cell tower, but you can still text. I wanted to ask more questions, but I immediately buckled in and started texting Kristen. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, we're fine. Tina's asleep right now. You good?" "Yeah." "Have you talked to Holden?" "Yeah, he said we'll meet at his cabin. Is he on his way now?" "No, he's still dropping us off. Text me when you see him." "Alright, see you in a bit." And with that, I felt slightly relieved. I was going to wait in person to tell her about my mother, Jack, and Jason. Eventually, we reached his cabin, and I took Tyler up to a spare bedroom as Holden drove off. I'm growing restless at not being able to do anything, but I have Tyler to look after right now. Do you think we'll be alright?